Here we are, Brian, our final game of the 2021 season to preview. We know that the Buffs are going to be home for Christmas no matter what happens in Salt Lake City on Friday afternoon. How much do you think CU's performance against the Utes is going to shape how the 2021 season is perceived going into the offseason?
Not a lot, unless they just get totally destroyed. I think this season's kind of defined as it is right now, and I think Utah is a team that is maybe the best team the Buffs have faced, and especially out there. I'm not expecting anything miraculous to happen out there. So unless they get absolutely destroyed, I think that it's not going to change a whole lot of what we think about this team.
This is a big football game for Brendan Lewis, I think, going into the offseason. If he has a really big performance out there, maybe you feel better about the progression that he made, getting all the action, all the game action that he got during his second year as a Buff. But if he really struggles, I think it's going to be harder for him to win this starting job with JT Shrout coming back from an injury. And I guess we'll see how Drew Carter develops. Owen McCown won't be here until the summer, but maybe they bring in a transfer at quarterback as well. Don't you think, even though this game necessarily, whether it's a 4-8 season or a 5-7 season, it's not going to matter a great deal for Brendan Lewis? This could be a big deal.
Yeah, and I think it's probably that case for a few positions, but certainly for Brendan Lewis, you want to look good and go into the offseason with some momentum. And based on recent history, guys that have torn their ACL in fall camp or in the season don't participate in spring ball. So, can we expect to see JT Shrout in spring ball? I don't know. If we don't, then is spring ball, Brendan Lewis, Drew Carter, and then maybe a transfer. So it's kind of a big deal for Brendan Lewis to gain some momentum going into spring ball, where he could have an opportunity to kind of solidify that spot, or maybe he does compete with JT Shrout in the spring. But either way, he's got to show something in this game. He's looked a little better in the second half of the season, but I do think he needs to, show something against the Utes. He's not going to go out and beat them, I don't think, but he's probably not going to throw for 300 yards. He's never done that. But can he look competent? Can he avoid some mistakes and at least give them a shot to hang around this game?
Chris Wilson is safe. He's going to be their defensive coordinator in 2022, but I do think this football game will also kind of shape the perception a little bit about where his defense is. Carl Durrell did not rule out the possibility of Nate Landman playing in this game, but I don't know about you, Brian. I'd be absolutely shocked if Nate Landman plays in this game. I think if there was a game that he was going to come back, he would have come back for that senior day game, and that didn't happen. So I don't expect to see Nate Landman out there on Friday afternoon. You look at this defense, for the first half of the season, they played really well. They were one of the better defenses in the Pac-12, kind of like what we saw last year when Nate Landman went down. You started to see the flaws in that middle of the defense. But you look at it right now, and this could change a little bit on Friday afternoon if Utah scores a ton of points. They have the second best scoring defense since Colorado joined the Pac-12. Obviously, 2016 was the other season that they had a better defense statistically in terms of allowing points. So I would maybe give, this defensive staff, a C plus, given the injuries that they've had there. There's concerns there, and how are they going to move forward without Nate Landman? That's a major concern. But I still don't put as much pressure on Chris Wilson as maybe some of these fans are right now.
Yeah, I think anybody, looking to fire Chris Wilson needs to pump the brakes a little bit. You mentioned that stat. That's pretty impressive when you compare it to 2016. That was a senior-laden defense with guys that, are still playing in the NFL, right? This defense, for the better half of the second half of this season, you've got you haven't had Nate Landman, you haven't had Guy Thomas, who was playing really good football until he got injured. You missed Mekhi Blackman for a couple of games. Last week we saw Devin Grant playing, I think, 57 snaps. He's probably their number 5 outside linebacker, because you're missing Guy Thomas. Josh Gustav is out for the year, and Jamar Montgomery was out with concussion. So there's 3 true freshmen sometimes in the secondary. I think they've done a pretty good job in kind of piecing things together with what they have. And it's not Chris Wilson's fault that there's not a ton of depth here. That's something the staff's got to build over time. I think this defense, I like what they've got. I like some of the young pieces. You and I have talked about it a little bit, but I don't want to put this on this group yet, but I sort of look at this season like 2013 when all those freshmen were playing. That was the group that wound up winning the South as seniors in 2016. I don't know if they'll be that good, but we're seeing a lot of these freshmen that are playing right now and making an impact, and they're having to see the field right now.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm fine with people having criticisms and concerns. I don't understand why we go right to this guy needs to be fired.
Right.
There's a lot of room in between. Okay, we need to get better and we need to fire the guy, right? At receiver, Brandon Rice is going to be out, so we'll see Nico Reed, who made that big interception at cornerback, as a kickoff returner. Levante Chenault's in the portal. Dimitri Stanley is clearly not 100%. So this is another opportunity for those freshman receivers, Ty Robinson, Chase Penry. And there was even a Chris Carpenter sighting in that Washington game. So another game where those young receivers are going to have to step up.
Yeah, and Daniel Arias too. I mean, he's kind of stepped up a little bit recently, and they've kind of relied on him a little bit more. I did talk to Dimitri this week, and you're right, he's not 100%. He said he's still sore sometimes. He apparently hyperextended his knee earlier this season and got a bone bruise from that. Still not 100%, but he's going out there and playing. It's been a weird year for him. I mean, I know he was expecting a huge year, and he doesn't even have 100 yards on the season, and he was hoping for 1,000-yard season. So crazy year for him, and obviously for a lot of those guys. But, Adam, I was looking the other day, what we thought were probably the top 7 receivers coming into the season, there's 2 of them left right now. Now, with Dimitri and Daniel Arias, I mean, they don't have Brendan Rice. They don't have Montana Lamonius Craig, Levante Chenault, Jalen Jackson, Maurice Bell. I mean, they're missing a lot of receivers. Some of those guys haven't been around all year, but it's crazy how depleted that receiver group has gotten this year.
When the Buffs and Utes joined the Pac-12 together back in 2011, they coined this game the Rumble and the Rockies. It has not developed into a rivalry. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is this a rivalry at this point? Is it a 1 or a 2 on that scale?
Yeah, the way these last few games have gone is probably a 1 or 2. I would say around 2016, I would have put it around an 8. And it's funny because years and years ago, I know I'm a history guy, but years and years ago, this was a great rivalry. I mean, these two teams, when they used to meet in the old, I think it was the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference, they had some great games, and they were pretty big rivals at that point. But obviously, it died down when they went their separate ways. I'd love to see it get back to that again because it can be a fun game, but. Boy, the Utes have just had their number the last 4 years, and it's crazy. Last year's game, which Utah won going away, was the closest of the last 4 meetings. So Utah has just kind of dominated this one. It's hard to call it a rivalry when CU hasn't put up much of a fight the last 4 years.
And I just respect Utah so much,
yeah.
For what they've done. They've won 2/3 of their games in 17-plus seasons under Kyle Whittingham, and they've now won the Pac-12 South 3 of the last 4 years. The year they didn't was last year, a strange COVID year. And, they're going to take on Oregon State, or Wazoo in the title game. I have a ton of respect for what they've done. They're just a solid program all around. And Kyle Whittingham's name comes up in some of these job searches. If I'm him, I just stay there because that's a great gig that he's got.
Yeah, I don't see him going anywhere. And you're right. And last year, they didn't win it because of the COVID year. I would say by the end of the season, they were the best team in the South. They just, got hit with some COVID stuff early in that season and lost a couple of games. And, as we know, it was strange for everybody. But, yeah, I don't see Kyle Whittingham going anywhere. I think that if he was going to leave Utah, he would have done it a long time ago. I think as long as he's there, Utah's going to be very tough to contend with for CU. And frankly, CU fans may not want to hear it, but that's what CU has strived to be, is what Utah is right now. I think in a lot of ways, Carl Durrell wants that, to be kind of hard-nosed on defense and be able to run the football. And then you get some good quarterback play and you can be elite. I think Carl Durrell would love to be that, but that's kind of the model right now. I mean, I would say that Utah is the most consistent team in the Pac-12 over the last 7-8 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess you put Oregon up there with them, but in the South, I mean, I think clearly they have been. This year, they ranked 2nd in the conference in scoring offense, 4th in scoring defense, the only team in the conference that ranks in the top 4 in both those categories. They did lose 3 games earlier this season, but they've really found it here lately. They've won 4 in a row, 48-point win over Stanford, a 20-point win over UCLA, and then last week, I think people expected them to compete against Utah, but I don't think many people expected them to win that football game by 31 points. It seems like, kind of the adage of well-coached teams is they get better as the season goes along, and that's the case again this year.
Yeah, and two of those losses early in the season came when they had Charlie Brewer starting at quarterback. Once they went to Cam Rising, I think they're 7-1 with only the loss to Oregon State, which was not a good loss for them, but they've played really good football. I'd argue he's potentially the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. And Devin Lloyd, as much as Buff fans love Nate Lamon, and we all love Nate Lamon, Devin Lloyd is one of the best linebackers in the country right now, and deserving of consideration for the Buckus Award. He's been fantastic. Then you have Britton Covey, who is about our age, out there playing receiver and returning kicks. They're kind of a complete team. That, although they're kicking, you and I talked about the other day, their kicking and punting game is not what it usually is. But that's a tough team. And when they turn it on, they're really good, as we saw last week against Oregon.
And where they are characteristically good again this year is in the trenches. 34 sacks on the season. That's 12 more than any other Pac-12 team. They rank 20 in the top 20 nationally in sacks. This is going to be, I talked about it being a big game for Brendan Lewis. I think you look at William Vallejos and kind of his audition here to potentially get that offensive line coaching job. This is a huge game for him to kind of show what he's done with this offensive line against one of the better defensive fronts in the country.
Yeah, and I also think it's a huge game for all those offensive linemen. I mean, those kids that are coming back, and we don't know who's going to come back. We know Kari Kutch won't be. Colby Purcell, I talked to him again this week, and he went through senior day. And the reason why is because he said he's undecided on next year. So we'll see if he comes back. But for those offensive linemen, you mentioned it's a big game for Brendan Lewis, but I think it's big for those offensive linemen. And how good can Buff fans feel about the Buffs in the trenches going forward? I think this is a game that kind of shows that. Like, what do these guys look like going forward, and how much help do they really need? We think they need a lot of help, but if the offensive line and defensive line kind of hold their own against Utah, then you feel a bit better about them.
Colorado came out, nothing to lose against Washington, defied all odds when you look at the box score and found a way to win that game. To go out to Salt Lake and have a chance, they're going to need Utah to have a Thanksgiving hangover, an Oregon win hangover. Well, how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, that's one thing that maybe this is the time to get Utah. I mean, we'll see. It is Thanksgiving week. They just had a big win against Oregon. There's really nothing for Utah to play for this week. They've already won the South. They can't win a national title with 3 losses. And really their focus is on they got to win the Pac-12 title next week. So are they looking ahead? Are they have that hangover from last week? Maybe you catch them in that regard, but it's also senior night. And I think that those guys will be fired up to send out guys like Devin Lloyd and some of those guys. And frankly, they've played pretty inspired football as they've honored those 2 kids that have passed away in the last year. So they've played inspired football. So I just don't. I mean, if the Buffs have 183 yards of offense again, they're going to get destroyed by Utah. Yeah. I mean, they've got to have a lot more than they did last week. I think Utah wins this going away. I think they're just a much better football team. And even if there's a little bit of a hangover, I think it's maybe a first half hangover, and then Kyle Whittingham lights into them at halftime, and they pull away in the second half. I think that Utah wins this thing 41-20, and kind of wins it going away.
And I've got a similar score prediction. I'm going to say Utah wins 41-24, which, depending how you view this, that might be kind of an optimistic view at this game, right? That Colorado could somehow, your predictions, 20 points, mine's Colorado scores 24. Given what we've seen from this Colorado offense at times this season against a really good Utah defense, you'd actually feel decently well about that. I don't expect anybody to feel great about a 21 or a 17-point loss going into the offseason. But we saw how passionate CU was for senior day with just a few seniors. This is going to be senior day out there in Salt Lake City. So all signs point towards Utah running away with this. The one thing that gives me pause is back in 2011 when Utah needed to win that game to win the South, and Colorado went in there in John Embry's first season and pulled off a massive upset. I don't think that's going to happen. But how Pac-12 would it be for Colorado to go out there and pull off this upset?
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, you and I talked about the other day at the press conference was, there's all those things that, there could be the hangover, Utah looking forward. But more than anything, just the way this Pac-12 season's gone, it would be fitting if Colorado won this football game. Just, I mean, every week there's a game in the Pac-12. You're like, nobody saw that coming, right? Even 2 weeks ago, Arizona almost beating Utah down in Tucson was like, geez, where'd that come from? Last week, Utah pummeling Oregon, like, where'd that come from? So every week there's something that you see in the Pac-12, like, well, I didn't see that one coming. So if Colorado were to win this football game, that would definitely fall in the category of nobody saw that coming.
We're both heading out to Salt Lake City for this game. Brian, are you going to get some turkey before you head out?
Definitely. I'm having dinner with the family and then flying out Thanksgiving night. So, I kind of joked with, joked to you before that, we'll see after Thanksgiving dinner if the seatbelt on the airplane actually fits that night. So we'll see.
I'm taking a risk. I'm flying out early on Friday morning. So please, Southwest, don't do it to me. Get me out there for the game. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, Brian, and happy Thanksgiving to all the CU fans out there. We'll be back after the game we'll kind of wrap up the whole 2021 season out there in Salt Lake City.